Taira no Masakado is often remembered as Japan's first true samurai, due to his leadership of a self-governing party and his rebellion against the central government in Kyoto during the Heian period. He defied the established order and formed his own power base, giving true purpose to the warrior nobleman who would later become known as the samurai. Born into a distinguished aristocratic family, yet his legacy would not be one of quiet service. With remarkable speed and strategy, Masakado seized control of several provinces, ousting local officials and taking possession of the imperial seals and keys, symbols of authority. His bold defiance shook the foundations of centralized rule. According to the Shomonki, an anonymous chronicle written shortly after his death, a divine oracle from Hachiman, the god of archery and war, proclaimed Masakado as the Emperor of Japan. This message was delivered through a shamaness, and Masakado, emboldened by this divine endorsement, assumed the title of Shinnō, meaning the new emperor, even though there was already an existing emperor. Legends tell of a mystical encounter in which a local goddess bathed Masakado in radiant light, rendering him nearly invincible, save for a single shadowed spot on his body, similar to the myth of the Achilles heel. In the war that followed his imperial proclamation, it is said that he was betrayed by a lover, and an arrow, striking the one vulnerable place in his body, ended his life. His severed head was taken to Kyoto and displayed in the eastern marketplace as a warning to future rebels. The emperor forbade a proper burial or memorial, leaving Masakado's spirit to wander the earth, restless and unredeemed. Thus, he became one of the 3 Great Onryō of Japan, vengeful spirits believed to wreak havoc in the world of the living, as retribution for the injustices they suffered. Over the centuries, Masakado's legacy evolved. Many came to revere him as a god or demigod, admiring his courage in defying imperial rule, as Japan at the time was lawless and terrifying. Some saw Masakado's rebellion as positive and a rebirth for a land rife with corruption, where the lowborn suffered. Shrines were built in his honor, and offerings were made to appease his wrath. Stories persist of his ghost appearing throughout the ages, bringing misfortune, plagues, earthquakes, and other calamities whenever his memory was dishonored. Yet, paradoxically, he is also regarded as a protective deity, a bringer of prosperity to those who venerate him sincerely. To this day, people still visit his shrine in Tokyo, leaving prayers and offerings in hopes of earning his favor, or at least avoiding his wrath. This is the legend of Taira no Masakado, the divine rebel, the first samurai, and the vengeful spirit, who perhaps still holds power in Japan's spiritual realm. This is his story. In the time of Masakado, the aristocratic elite, those privileged courtiers who once diligently governed the affairs of state, had grown indifferent to the chronic problems plaguing the realm: lawlessness, misrule, and growing public discontent spread unchecked, both in the capital and throughout the distant provinces. Many governors appointed by the court had become little more than self-serving opportunists, outlaws in noble robes, who pursued personal gain at the expense of justice and order. Gangs of bandits operated with impunity, often in collusion with corrupt officials, intercepting shipments of rice intended as tax tribute to the capital. The common people suffered gravely. Peasants were reduced to destitution, trapped in a life of hardship with no relief in sight. The Japan of Masakado's day was far from a unified, harmonious state. Instead, it was a fragmented patchwork of rival clans, held together beneath the nominal authority of the imperial court. Though the emperor was meant to command the absolute loyalty of all, true power had begun to slip from his grasp. The nation was formally divided into 66 provinces, each under the jurisdiction of governors appointed by the throne. Yet, by this time, while the structure of imperial rule remained intact, the substance of that authority had faded. The Fujiwara clan, an influential aristocratic family, effectively seized control of the court, ruling through child emperors placed on the throne more as ceremonial figures than sovereigns. These emperors were often the sons of Fujiwara daughters, and even when they came of age, real power remained in the hands of Fujiwara regents. Thus, the prestige of the emperor diminished, and with it, the legitimacy of centralized rule. The decline of imperial authority marked the beginning of the collapse of Japan's bureaucratic state. A striking symbol of this decline was the disbanding of the national conscript army in the late 8th century, replaced by a system of locally raised warriors. This shift transferred the responsibility of law and order to the sons of the provincial lords, accelerating the militarization of the countryside. Over time, these provincial families, once mere landowners and civil administrators, came to wield real power through their private armies. They formed a new warrior aristocracy, exercising de facto independence while the imperial court grew increasingly irrelevant. It was from this emerging class of military leaders that men like Masakado would rise, men who would no longer wait for the emperor's command, but act according to their own sense of justice, strength, and ambition. Masakado traced his lineage to Emperor Kanmu, the 50th Emperor of Japan, whose reign marked the height of imperial power. Masakado descended from the emperor through his great-grandson, Prince Takamochi. In the year 889, Takamochi was granted the surname Taira, thus founding one of the most distinguished lines of the Taira clan, a family that would go on to shape Japanese history. At the time, it was common practice to reduce imperial descendants to the status of subjects and dispatch them to distant provinces, where they would establish new aristocratic houses. This policy, firmly in place during Takamochi's lifetime, served both to ease tensions at court and to extend the emperor's influence across the realm. Takamochi's son Yoshimasa was commander and chief of the Northern Defense Headquarters in Mutsu, and he had 8 sons. The third among them was Masakado. Little is known of Masakado's early life, as written records are scarce. Most sources identify him as a military commander by profession, and he is believed to have been born in around the year 900. From his early actions, it is clear that Masakado was not just a warrior, but a leader with a small loyal band of followers. These men, likely peasants and retainers, would have worked the land in times of peace, and served as his core fighting force in times of conflict. In his mid to late teens, Masakado is thought to have travelled to the capital, seeking opportunity and service. There, he entered the household of Fujiwara no Tadahira, a powerful court noble and statesman. During this period, while the emperor still held symbolic authority, true power lay in the hands of the Fujiwara clan, an aristocratic dynasty that had intermarried with the imperial line. Some accounts suggest that Masakado served as an imperial guard, or part of the chamberlain's office, responsible for protecting the palace and its emperor. This would not be surprising, given Masakado's noble bloodline and his reputed skill in martial arts. By the year 931, Masakado left the capital and returned to his home province of Shimosa. According to the Jinno Shotoki, a chronicle compiled between the years 1339 and 1343, he departed feeling disheartened, possibly due to failing to secure a post within the imperial police headquarters. However, this may be speculative. A more likely reason was the death of his father, which required his presence to settle matters concerning the family estate. It was upon his return to the provinces that Masakado's legendary tale, as chronicled by the Shomonoki, truly begins. Taira no Masakado's fateful conflict with his uncle, Taira no Yoshikane, began over what seemed a petty dispute involving a woman. Some folk traditions suggest the quarrel may have centered on a daughter of Minamoto no Mamoru, a noble with imperial descent. Beneath the surface, however, deeper tensions simmered, particularly over land. Masakado's uncles had seized family estates that rightfully belonged to him. Taira no Kunika, as the clan's eldest and head, appeared to have absorbed his younger brother's inheritance, Masakado's father, into his own domain. This family feud, long stewing, soon erupted into open warfare. In the year 935, Masakado was ambushed by the three sons of Minamoto no Mamoru, Tasuku, Takashi and their brother, who through marriage were allied with Masakado's uncles. Trapped between retreat and resistance, Masakado chose to stand and fight. As the battle began, a favourable wind carried his arrows true. Though Mamoru's sons fought bravely, they were decisively defeated. All three perished, alongside many of their warriors. Only a few lived to flee and recount the tale. In the aftermath, Masakado's fury was unleashed. He ravaged the settlements of Nomoto, Shida, Oguchi, and Motoki, setting noble mansions and peasant homes alike ablaze. Those who sought shelter indoors were burned alive. Others were shot down by arrows as they fled. Great storehouses of rice meant to feed generations were lost to flame. Over 500 homes tied to the Minamoto clan were consumed, their inhabitants killed. The fire roared like thunder, its smoke darkening the sky. The devastation plunged both officials and commoners into mourning. One of Masakado's uncles, Kunika, was also consumed by the flames. Far away in the capital, the court official Taira no Sadamori, Kunika's son, received the news. His father was dead, and his ancestral home reduced to cinders. Grieving deeply, he took leave of court and returned to the countryside. Hoping to bring peace to the land, he sent a letter to Masakado, expressing a desire for reconciliation and harmony. But even as Sadamori sought peace, vengeance stirred elsewhere. Masakado's uncle, Taira no Yoshimasa, another son of Prince Takamochi, plotted retaliation. He too was linked to Minamoto no Mamoru by marriage, and Mamoru's grief over the loss of his sons burned like a fire. Yoshimasa, fueled by that grief, renounced kinship and resolved to destroy his nephew. Seeing his fervour, Mamoru smiled grimly. Yoshimasa armed his men and marched to war. Hearing of their advance, Masakado rode swiftly to the province of Hitachi. When he arrived, Yoshimasa cried out a bold challenge, and battle was joined. The clash was fierce, but once again Masakado triumphed. More than 60 of Yoshimasa's warriors were struck down by arrows, and many fled in disarray. News of Yoshimasa's rout spread quickly, and Masakado's legend grew. Yoshimasa, humiliated, became more determined. He sent an impassioned letter to his elder brother Yoshikane, pleading for reinforcements. Thunder rumbles with wind and rain. I beg your strength to end Masakado's destruction. Once he is vanquished, peace will return to our troubled land. Yoshikane agreed. With their forces united, the brothers soon crossed paths with Sadamori. Yoshikane would scold him harshly. I hear you've grown friendly with Masakado, unworthy of a warrior whose kin lie dead, and whose treasures have been looted. Join us and restore honor. Moved by their words, Sadamori joined their cause. This great army, now comprising of 3 senior members of the Taira clan, would soon approach Masakado's position. Masakado, learning of their approach, saw that his own men were exhausted and outnumbered. But as Yoshikane's soldiers formed a wall of shields for the final blow, Masakado struck first. He launched a sudden counterattack, and over 80 enemy horsemen fell. Yoshikane's troops panicked and fled, pursued relentlessly until they took refuge in the provincial offices. Despite much hostility, Masakado, bound by blood, spared his uncle Yoshikane's life. That same day, he reported his uncle's betrayal in official documents sent to nearby provinces. Then, returning home, he enjoyed a fleeting moment of peace. But the peace was short-lived. In response to charges brought by Minamoto no Mamoru, the Council of State summoned Masakado to the capital. Killing an official was a capital offense, and fearing for his life, Masakado journeyed quickly to the court. There, though unfamiliar with the law, he defended himself eloquently and with apparent divine favor. The emperor, moved by his sincerity, deemed his crimes minor. Masakado was questioned briefly and was granted a full pardon. His warrior reputation soared, and he returned to the province of Shimosa with honor. No sooner had he settled in than Yoshikane, still harboring resentment, launched yet another attack. His forces, well armed and numerous, advanced to the Kogai ford near the border. The gods, it was said, turned against Masakado that day. His troops, poorly prepared, broke ranks and fled. Yoshikane, seizing the opportunity, torched villages and farmlands, leaving destruction in his wake. Shamed by defeat, Masakado went into hiding, but he soon returned, rebuilding his army. The family feud between the senior members of the Taira clan turned into a cycle of vengeance. It is said that neither fatigue nor the elements could cool the hatred between Masakado and his uncles. Nevertheless, Masakado's legend grew with each passing battle. To some, he no longer seemed entirely mortal, a warrior untouched by fear, perhaps even by death itself. Favoured by the gods, he moved through war like a man chosen by fate. Sadamori denounced Masakado as an evil man and publicly condemned him. Enraged by the slander, Masakado set out with a mere 100 men to confront him. They fought, but neither side prevailed. Sadamori then submitted formal complaints to the Council of State, prompting another imperial summons. He carried the edict himself, but Masakado, now defiant, refused to comply. Soon after, Masakado's uncle Yoshikane died, most likely of natural causes. His long-standing enemy was gone, and the war-weary provinces breathed a sigh of relief. In the year 938, Masakado travelled to Musashi province to mediate a dispute between the esteemed district magistrate Musashi no Takeshiba and the provincial governor, Okiyo no Okimi, who was widely seen as ruthless and corrupt. However, negotiations collapsed when Tageshiba's soldiers attacked Okiyo's ally, Minamoto no Tsunemoto, who was the vice-governor of the province of Musashi. Suspecting a conspiracy involving Takeshiba, Okimi, and Masakado to overthrow him, Tsunemoto fled the capital and spread false accusations. In response, the regent Fujiwara no Tadahira ordered Masakado to answer these charges. Masakado produced clear evidence of his honourable intentions, earning favour from officials across the land, and securing a reputation of integrity and respect. In the year 939, Masakado welcomed into his entourage a dubious figure, Fujiwara no Haruaki, a wealthy cultivator from Hitachi who was wanted for multiple crimes. Despite the demands of the authorities, Masakado concealed Haruaki and protected him as his loyal follower. Persuaded by Haruaki, Masakado marched on Hitachi in the 11th month of the year 939 with a large army. Upon reaching the provincial offices, he presented a written petition demanding that Haruaki be allowed to reside in Hitachi without arrest. The officials refused and chose to fight. The ensuing battle was fierce, and all 3,000 government soldiers were slain. Though commanding only 1,000 men, Masakado surrounded the offices and sealed off all exits. Vice-Governor Korechika, faced with defeat, surrendered and accepted Masakado's terms. Following victory, Masakado generously distributed rolls of prized silk and rare treasures among the people, scattering them as freely as clouds across the sky. He then assumed control of the provincial administration, solidifying his power. One day, the provincial governor Prince Okiyo approached Masakado in secret with a cautious proposal. Upon reflection, he said, conquering even a single province will surely invite harsh condemnation from the court. It might be wiser to seize control of all the Bando provinces and wait to see how events unfold. Masakado replied with quiet confidence, "That is precisely my intention. I will begin with the 8 Bando provinces, and in time, claim the imperial capital itself. First, I must seize the official seals and keys from every administration throughout these provinces, driving out the governors and sending them back to the capital. When that is done, the 8 provinces will be firmly in my grasp, and the people will stand with me." With their fateful exchange concluded, Masakado set forth once more, commanding several thousand men as he crossed into the Shimosuke province. However, he had a new ambition now. He wanted to be the emperor. Fujiwara no Kiminasa, the newly appointed governor, knelt before Masakado and respectfully presented the seals and keys of office. Amidst the ensuing upheaval, all government buildings and surrounding grounds fell under Masakado's control. The governor was sent back to the capital, his journey forced by Masakado's hand. Next, Masakado entered the Kozuke province. Fujiwara no Hisanori no Ason, the vice-governor of Kozuke, likewise surrendered his seals and keys and was quickly dispatched to the capital. Masakado stationed guards at the 4 gates and held a solemn ceremony to appoint new province officials. During the proceedings, a shamaness appeared and proclaimed, "I am the messenger of the great Bodhisattva Hachiman. I hereby confer upon my son Masakado the title of Emperor." Masakado would raise the certificate of rank high above his head. The guards at each gate rose to their feet cheering, while thousands of soldiers prostrated themselves in unison before their new sovereign. Masakado's chief ministers, Prince Okiyo and Fujiwara no Furumochi, formally bestowed upon him the title of new emperor. In response to this pivotal moment, Masakado composed a letter and addressed it to Fujiwara no Tadahira, the chancellor and regent of the imperial court, to explain his actions and plead for understanding. It read, "It has been many years since I last had the honor of receiving your counsel. I have long wished to see you again, but the events I must now recount are so unexpected that I scarcely know where to begin. I can only hope your excellency will grant me the grace of your patience and understanding. Some time ago, I was summoned to the capital regarding a charge brought against me by Minamoto no Mamoru. In great fear, I hastened to appear, but upon presenting myself, I was informed that I had been pardoned and was sent back to Shimosa without delay. Believing the matter resolved, I returned to my village and set aside military concerns, loosening my bowstring and living quietly. However, peace did not last. Taira no Yoshikane, the former vice-governor of Shimosa, raised an army of 7,000 men and marched against me. I could not simply flee. I was forced to defend myself. In the fighting, many of my men were slain, my family taken captive, and my property seized. The government of Shimosa submitted a full report of this to the Council of State. In response, the court issued orders to assist in capturing Yoshikane and his allies, and the matter seemed resolved. Yet, before long, I received another summons to the capital. Troubled by this renewed command, I instead sent a detailed explanation of my situation to Anaho no Tomayuki, the bearer of the order. Still, I heard nothing further from the court. While I remained anxious waiting, Taira no Sadamori arrived in Hitachi during the summer, carrying yet another imperial summons. Provincial officials repeatedly forwarded this order to me. Then Sadamori, avoiding pursuit, secretly fled back to the capital. Despite his flight, the authorities failed to investigate him and instead endorsed his accusations, issuing a fresh edict against me. How is this justice? Minamoto no Tsukemoto, 5th rank controller of the right, conveyed your will to me, stating, "Based on the report of Vice-Governor Tsunemoto of Musashi, it has been decided to summon Masakado again." While awaiting this envoy, the situation in Hitachi worsened. Tanemori, son of Vice-Governor Fujiwara no Korechika, abused his position to slander others and stir unrest. On behalf of one of my followers, Fujiwara no Furuaki, I travelled to Hitachi to seek resolution. But Tanemori, in secret alliance with Sadamori, led 3,000 soldiers in a raid of the provincial armory, seizing arms and challenging me to battle. In response, I led my men into combat and defeated them. In the aftermath, many perished. Those who remained were taken prisoner. Vice-Governor Korechika later submitted a written confession, accepting blame for the misconduct of his son. Thus, I unintentionally came to hold control over the province of Hitachi. Realizing the gravity of this act, I knew conquering even a single province was a crime equal to seizing 100, so I resolved to take the other Bando provinces while awaiting the court's decision. With respect, I must speak to my lineage. I am without question a 5th generation descendant of Emperor Kanmu. If I were to hold half the realm, would it not be the fulfillment of what fate owes me? The chronicles tell of many in ages past who rose to rule through the strength of arms. I too have been blessed by heaven with martial ability. Who among my contemporaries matches me? And yet, rather than recognize my service or merit, the court has condemned me. When I reflect upon my past, I see little to take pride in. What small honor I once gained has long since faded. I humbly ask your excellency regard my plea with sympathy. Decades have passed since I first served under you in my youth. Never could I have imagined that such events would unfold during your regency. My regret is overwhelming. I have no words to express it, though I have indeed considered overthrowing the established order. I have never once forgotten your excellency, my former master. If you could show me just a measure of understanding, it would ease the burden in my heart. This is my one and only wish, echoed in every word I have written above. With deepest respect, Masakado. Masakado embarked on a ceremonial tour of his claimed dominion, stretching as far as the provinces of Musashi and Sagami. All in all, he conquered 8 provinces. Then, in a bold and unprecedented move, he issued a proclamation that he had the divine right to claim the imperial throne. The news sent shockwaves throughout the capital. Panic gripped the court. The rightful emperor, shaken by the audacity of this rebellion, turned to divine intervention. The names of the traitors were burned in a fire on consecrated altars, and effigies of the rebels were hung beneath buckthorn and maple trees, ancient symbols of warding off evil. Meanwhile, Masakado gathered an army of 5,000 and marched towards Hitachi, seeking out his long-standing rival, Taira no Sadamori. Days passed, yet there was no sign of the enemy. With no battle in sight, Masakado dismissed the troops who he had summoned from various corners of the Bando region, sending them back to their homes. Now fewer than 1,000 warriors remain at his side. Word of Masakado's reduced numbers soon reached Sadamori. Without delay, he joined forces with Fujiwara no Hidesato, and together they raised an army of over 4,000 men. The final confrontation was at hand. On the day of the battle, the new Emperor Masakado himself led the charge. He raised his voice in a thunderous battle cry, brandished his sword, and rode into the fray at the head of his men. Yet, in the chaos of combat, fate turned against him. It is said that a stray arrow, guided by the hand of the gods, struck him down on the front lines. There, the rebel emperor fell, with the gods having betrayed him. According to legend, Hidesato, a Japanese aristocrat and lord, joined Masakado's cause, though he never held much affection for the man and soon came to regret his decision. Masakado was no ordinary warrior. He was said to stand over 7 feet tall, his body seemingly forged from iron, and his left eye bore 2 pupils. Even more unnerving, he rode into battle flanked by 6 warriors who were his exact doubles, although these warriors were more shadow than human, making it impossible to tell which among them was the true Masakado. Despite being awed and perhaps unsettled by Masakado's fearsome presence, Hidesato eventually found himself captivated by one of Masakado's concubines while at his court. She confided in him a secret. Masakado's sole vulnerability lay just beneath his ear, and only his true form would cast a shadow. Armed with this knowledge, Hidesato took his chance and betrayed him. He loosed an arrow at the hidden weak spot, striking true. As the real Masakado fell, the 6 ghostly warriors vanished like mist, revealing at last the man behind the legend. His head was severed and sent to the capital as a grim trophy. His generals and loyal officers were captured and executed. The rebellion itself had been crushed. The Shomonki closes with a haunting final note, a message from Masakado's own spirit, speaking from the depths of hell. There he describes the torments he endures for the sins he committed in the world of the living, an emperor in defiance, a soul now bound in suffering. According to legend, Taira no Masakado's severed head refused to decay. It had been displayed in the eastern market of Kyoto for months, yet it remained as lifelike as the day it was cut from its shoulders. The flesh stayed unspoiled, the eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, and the mouth twisted into a terrifying grimace, as though frozen in fury. And then, the impossible happened. One night, the head began to shine with a ghostly light. Slowly, it lifted into the air, rising, glowing, before suddenly flying across the sky, streaking like a shooting star over the land of Japan. It soared eastward, back toward Shimosa, the province Masakado once called home. But even a spirit must rest. Weary from its long journey, the head descended and came to rest in a small fishing village, a place that centuries later would grow into the great city of Edo, now known as Tokyo. The villagers, astonished but reverent, cleaned the head and gave it a proper burial. Over the grave, they built a shrine and named it Kubizuka, the Mount of the Head. To the common people, Masakado was no traitor, but a hero, a noble warrior who dared stand against a corrupt and indifferent nobility. They worshipped him as a protector and symbol of justice. Yet, despite the offerings and the shrine, his spirit remained restless. Years after the burial, a ghostly figure clad in samurai armor was seen wandering the area near the mound. Locals whispered that Masakado's soul still lingered, bound to the world of the living by rage and betrayal. In the early 1300s, a devastating plague swept through Edo, claiming countless lives. Many believed it was the wrath of Masakado, still unappeased. To calm his fury, his spirit was enshrined once more, this time in the grand and prestigious Kanda Shrine. There, he was elevated to the rank of a deity and became one of the honored guardian gods of the city. For a time, his vengeance was stilled, but peace would not last. In the year 1874, during the reign of Emperor Meiji, the emperor visited Kanda Shrine. Masakado's divine status was deemed an embarrassment, an enemy of the imperial family and a usurper, honored alongside the gods. His title was revoked, and his spirit was relegated to a smaller secondary shrine on the outskirts of the city. Years later came disaster. In the year 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake reduced much of Tokyo to rubble. Among the whispers in the wreckage was a familiar name, Masakado. Many believed the spirit of the betrayed samurai had once again risen in anger, and when the Ministry of Finance constructed its headquarters over his burial site, strange misfortunes began to unfold. Employees reported eerie illnesses and mysterious accidents. In just 5 years, 14 officials died, including the finance minister himself. Was it coincidence? Perhaps, but the government didn't take any chances. The building was demolished, the burial site restored, and a solemn ritual was performed to pacify Masakado's vengeful soul. After World War II, American forces reportedly attempted to pave over the site to build a parking lot. The The story goes that a bulldozer suffered a fatal malfunction, killing the operator. Plans were immediately abandoned. By the 20th century, nearly every unexplained misfortune in that district of Tokyo was blamed on Masakado's unquiet spirit, and some believed that the fate of the entire city was tied to his mood. In the year 1984, after decades of public pressure, the rebellious warrior was reinstated as a deity. Thus, the legend of Taira no Masakado endures, not merely as a warrior, not solely as a ghost, but as a god, both feared and venerated. In the heart of modern Tokyo, where glass towers pierce the sky and bullet trains hum beneath the earth, his spirit is said to linger, watching, perhaps even now, listening. Masakado is often remembered as Japan's first true samurai, a title born not only of his martial skill, but of his bold defiance during the Heian period. He led a self-governing force in open rebellion against the imperial court in Kyoto, breaking from the old order to forge a power of his own, giving birth to the samurai class. During his lifetime, he was bestowed the title of New Emperor, in an age when the power of shamans were deeply revered. His unmatched prowess in battle left no room for doubt. He was favoured by the gods. His letter to the imperial court, confessing his faults and seeking redemption, gives us a glimpse of his point of view and the wrongs he had suffered. Yet, the imperial court's treatment of his severed head upon his death, as well as the injustices he suffered in life, stirred deep unrest in his spirit. Though a millennia has passed, the story of Masakado still echoes, a tale of rebellion, retribution, and restless divinity.
Honda Tadakatsu was a renowned Japanese samurai, general, and daimyo, a feudal lord who loyally served all three of Japan's great unifiers. He rose to prominence during the turbulent Sengoku period, a time marked by relentless civil wars and profound social upheaval. As the power of the Ashikaga shogunate, the militaristic government, waned, regional lords or daimyos began to assert greater political authority, commanding armies far mightier than those of the declining shogunate. The title of shogun, though ceremonially granted by the emperor, signified the true military ruler of Japan. Yet, as the influence of the shoguns diminished, the nation descended into an era of near constant warfare, where battles erupted with unceasing frequency. It was amid this chaos that the legend of Honda Tadakatsu was born, celebrated for his unmatched swordsmanship and unwavering valour. He is said to have fought in 57 battles over the course of his life, never once receiving a single wound, earning the moniker, the warrior who surpassed death itself. He is also remembered for his striking and distinctive armour, most notably his imposing helmet adorned with great antlers. This bold design would have made him an obvious target on the battlefield, and it seemed only to reflect his fearless spirit. Far from seeking concealment, Tadakatsu was renowned for his audacious charges into the heart of enemy lines, recklessly hurling himself into the fray in a relentless effort to break the enemy formations and usually turn the tide of battle. He also became one of the 4 Heavenly Kings of the Tokugawa, describing 4 highly effective samurai generals who fought on behalf of Tokugawa Ieyasu, who would rise to become the shogun, effectively ending the Sengoku period, which finally ended the constant wars in Japan. This is the tale of the warrior who surpassed death itself. This is the story of Honda Tadakatsu. Tadakatsu was born in the year 1548 in the province of Mikawa, being the eldest son of Honda Tadataka. The Honda clan traces its lineage to the distinguished Fujiwara no Kenemichi, a revered statesman and court noble of Japan's Heian period, which spanned from the years 794 to 1185. From a young age, Tadakatsu was deeply shaped by the social order and political tensions of the era. As a member of a prominent family, he was likely groomed for leadership early in life, undergoing rigorous training in the arts of war and governance. His education would have included the mastery of swordsmanship, archery, horsemanship, and other martial disciplines, skills essential for a warrior of noble blood. Tragically, Tadakatsu lost both his father and grandfather during his early adolescence. Following their deaths, he entered into the service of Tokugawa Ieyasu, then a young daimyo himself. Over time, Tadakatsu would rise to become one of Ieyasu's most trusted retainers and one of his foremost generals. Legend holds that Tadakatsu saw his first battle at the tender age of 13 in the year 1560. Initially, his uncle Honda Tadazane slew an enemy samurai and asked Tadakatsu to cut off the corpse's head. Tadakatsu refused, declaring his desire to earn his own merit through personal valor. Without hesitation, he charged into the fray, striking down an enemy himself and taking his own trophy. Even in his youth, Tadakatsu's courage was legendary, his blade baptized in the blood of battle at the tender age of 14. In the year 1566, at the age of 19, Honda Tadakatsu was elevated to the esteemed rank of Hatamoto, a title reserved for high-ranking samurai. With this promotion, he was entrusted with command over a cavalry unit of over 50 horsemen, a reflection of his martial promise and the trust placed in him by his lord. By the year 1570, the formidable warlord Oda Nobunaga had risen to become one of the most powerful daimyo in all of Japan. He installed a puppet shogun from the Ashikaga clan, seizing control of the nation's central government, while earning the respect and recognition of Emperor Ogimachi himself. By this time, the emperor was more of a ceremonial role, with the real power being in the hands of the shogun, or in this case, the warlord who controlled him. Yet, despite Nobunaga's dominance, many proud and independent clans still refused to yield to his rule, and unrest continued to simmer across the land. Amid this shifting landscape, Tokugawa Ieyasu, Tadakatsu's lord, formed an alliance with Nobunaga. But such a union brought further conflict. Among the fiercest of Nobunaga's opponents were the Azai and Asakura clans. When Nobunaga launched sieges against Odani and Yokoyama castles, strongholds of these defiant clans, war became inevitable. On the morning of July the 30th in the year 1570, the Battle of Anigawa began. Oda's forces clashed with the Azai on the right flank, while Tokugawa's troops faced against the Asakura on the left. Soon, the battle descended into a brutal melee within the shallow waters of the Ane River. Nobunaga's warriors fought upstream against the Azai, while Tokugawa's forces, including Tadakatsu, battled downstream against the Asakura. Tadakatsu, commanding the rearguard, was given a pivotal role. As the Tokugawa army began to falter under the relentless advance of the Asakura, Tadakatsu suddenly spurred his horse forward, charging alone into the heart of the enemy force, being 10,000 strong. This audacious act shocked his comrades and prompted Tokugawa Ieyasu himself to lead a counterattack, rallying his men to support Tadakatsu and halt the Asakura's momentum. Against all the odds, the Tokugawa forces turned the tide and defeated the Asakura that day. Tadakatsu survived, despite having placed himself in the gravest of dangers. One chronicled moment of the battle describes Tadakatsu engaging in single combat with a towering Asakura warrior described as a giant, named Magara Naotaka. Their fierce duel, however, was cut short when the Asakura army began its retreat. With the Asakura forces routed, Tokugawa Ieyasu immediately sent Tadakatsu and Sakai Yasumasa to reinforce Oda Nobunaga, who was struggling against the Azai on the right flank. As Tadakatsu's men struck Azai Nagamasa's flank, the enemy lines collapsed under the pincer assault. In the chaos of that final push, Tadakatsu once again fought recklessly, disregarding his own life, and yet astonishingly, not a single blade, arrow or bullet touched him. This miraculous survival in the midst of such ferocious combat would become the hallmark of his legend, a warrior whose valor was matched only by the favor of fate, and whose body would bear no wound from battle, only the unshakable aura of invincibility. In the year 1572, the renowned warlord Takeda Shingen, known across the land as the Tiger of Kai for his fearsome military prowess, launched his western campaign in order to encircle and isolate Oda Nobunaga's forces. Amid this rising threat, Honda Tadakatsu led a Tokugawa scouting party to observe the enemy's movements. However, they soon encountered the vanguard of the advancing Takeda army. The Tokugawa scouts quickly attempted a retreat, but the Takeda troops gave a swift and relentless pursuit, and a clash would erupt near the Mikano River. Tadakatsu was tasked with commanding the rearguard of the main Tokugawa force, which had taken up a position at the base of a hill, terrain ill-suited for defense. The Takeda vanguard struck hard and fast, catching Tadakatsu's men in disarray. Their sudden assault overwhelmed the first two of the three tired Tokugawa formations. To prevent any escape, the Takeda also unleashed volleys of gunfire towards Tadakatsu's position. Faced with the threat of complete annihilation, Tadakatsu made a bold and desperate decision. He launched a furious charge to break through the encircling enemy. Though considered a suicidal maneuver, his men expected to become dead soldiers. Tadakatsu's force defied the odds. With extraordinary valor, they shattered the enemy lines and withdrew to Hamamatsu Castle. Thanks to Tadakatsu's leadership, a contingent of Tokugawa Ieyasu's main force was able to complete its retreat safely. This engagement came to be known as the Battle of Ichinosaka. Tadakatsu's presence on the battlefield left a lasting impression. The enemy took note of his striking antlered helmet and his fearsome spear, nicknamed the Dragonfly Cutter, said to be able to cleave a dragonfly in mid-flight. His fearless stand against the Takeda's ferocious charges earned him not only survival, but also admiration even from those who opposed him. This was yet another moment in his life where courage triumphed over certain death, further cementing his growing legend. In the year 1573, 1 year after the Battle of Ichinosaka, the formidable warlord Takeda Shingen launched a major campaign, leading an army of 30,000 men southward from his capital at Kofu into the Totomi province. At the same time, his trusted general Yamagata Masakage led a secondary force of 5,000 into the eastern Mikawa province. Their advance was swift and decisive, capturing both Yoshida Castle and Futamata Castle with little resistance. Opposing Shingen was Tokugawa Ieyasu, who held Hamamatsu Castle with a force of 8,000 men, reinforced by an additional 3,000 troops sent by his ally Oda Nobunaga. Yet, Despite the imbalance in numbers, Shingen's aim was not to confront Ieyasu directly or seize Hamamatsu. His true intention was to preserve his strength, bypass conflict where possible, and ultimately strike at Nobunaga himself, paving the way for a march on Kyoto. According to the Koyo Gunkan, the chronicle of Takeda military exploits, Shingen's forces outnumbered Ieyasu's by a margin of 3-1. Late in the afternoon, as snowflakes began to drift from the darkening sky, Tokugawa gunmen joined by peasant stone throwers opened fire upon the Takeda ranks. Firearms, still a relatively new and formidable presence on the battlefield, had proven effective in breaking cavalry charges. Ieyasu hoped that his superior weaponry would blunt Shingen's overwhelming advance, but that hope was swiftly shattered. Naito Masatoyo, commanding the Takeda vanguard, led a thunderous cavalry assault that struck with devastating force. Honda Tadakatsu's contingent on the Tokugawa right flank was the first to be overrun. The battlefield soon descended into chaos, death, destruction, and bloodshed that engulfed the Tokugawa lines. Facing annihilation, Ieyasu prepared to re-enter the fray himself, but was dissuaded by his retainers, who urged him to retreat and preserve his life for the struggles to come. Despite the devastation, Honda Tadakatsu once again emerged from the slaughter miraculously unharmed. In the early stages of the battle, he had managed to repel the initial wave of the enemy assault, but the sheer weight of the Takeda onslaught soon overwhelmed the Tokugawa defense. In the final phase of the battle, Tadakatsu clashed fearlessly with the Takeda general Ayamada Masuyuki, while other Tokugawa generals worked tirelessly to shield Ieyasu's withdrawal. It was thanks to Tadakatsu's remarkable composure and leadership during the retreat that Tokugawa's surviving forces were able to escape the battlefield. Though the encounter was a crushing defeat, it was not a total rout. Through courage, resilience, and the skill of the warriors like Tadakatsu, the Tokugawa would live to fight another day. Later, in the year 1573, Honda Tadakatsu was entrusted with the task of capturing Nagashino Castle. Leading his men, Tadakatsu successfully defeated the Takeda garrison defending the stronghold and completed the mission with distinction. Beyond Nagashino, he went on to reclaim several other key fortresses across the Totomi province, striking a significant blow to Takeda control in the region. The recapture of Nagashino was particularly vital, as it provided Tokugawa Ieyasu with a crucial transportation hub and a strong foothold for future operations. Fortune would soon favour the Oda Tokugawa alliance. Takeda Shingen, the fearsome Tiger of Kai, died shortly after the battle. Accounts of his death vary. Some say he succumbed to an old war wound, others to an assassin's bullet, and still others to illness, perhaps pneumonia. Whatever the cause, his passing marked a turning point in the war. His son and heir, Takeda Katsuyori, though a capable strategist in his own right, lacked both his father's brilliance and formidable reputation that had once inspired awe on the battlefield. Nevertheless, Katsuyori continued the fight, capturing several castles and withstanding the Oda Tokugawa advances for years. In the year 1575, hostilities flared once more as Katsuyori led an incursion into the Enshu province. Tadakatsu, serving under Tokugawa Ieyasu, participated in the campaign and helped capture Komyo Castle in June. Later that same month, he played a prominent role in the famed Battle of Nagashino. The Takeda cavalry launched wave after wave of ferocious charges.
However, each assault was repelled by a combination of wooden barricades and the deadly precision of matchlock gunmen. Tadakatsu himself commanded a unit of musketeers who inflicted devastating losses on the enemy. According to some accounts, Tadakatsu even set aside his firearm and took up his legendary spear, charging into the front lines to personally halt the advance of the enemy soldiers. The Battle of Nagashino was a pivotal victory for the Oda Tokugawa forces, with the Takeda clan losing 10,000 men, with most of their senior generals dying. Following the victory, Tadakatsu swiftly moved to capture Suwahara Castle, further cementing the alliance's momentum. In the year 1581, Tadakatsu took part in the Tokugawa assault on Tanaka Castle, then held by Takeda General Ichijo Nobutatsu. It is said that Tadakatsu scaled the castle walls and fought fiercely against the castle's defenders. Later that same year, during the siege of Takatenjin, Tadakatsu once again led the charge, helping to storm the fortress and slay the Takeda general Okabe Motonobu. The downfall of the Takeda clan came swiftly. In the year 1582, Takeda Katsuyori met his end at the Battle of Tenmokuzan, also known as the last stand of the Takeda. Though Honda Tadakatsu did not fight in that final battle, the collapse of the Takeda marked the end of an era, one in which Tadakatsu played a pivotal role. The powerful alliance between Tokugawa Ieyasu and Oda Nobunaga came to a sudden and tragic end with Nobunaga's death in the year 1582. He was betrayed and ambushed by one of his most trusted generals, Akechi Mitsuhide, in what would become known to history as the Honnoji incident, a turning point that shook the foundations of Japan. With the death of Japan's most dominant warlord, Tokugawa Ieyasu found himself exposed and without Nobunaga's protection. Stranded in Sakai, deep in hostile territory, Ieyasu and his closest retainers, including the ever-loyal Honda Tadakatsu, began an arduous and perilous journey back to the Mikawa province. Their path, however, was fraught with danger, not only from rival factions, but from predatory groups known as Ochimusha Gari, bands of armed outlaws who hunted and ambushed retreating or masterless samurai for plunder and vengeance. Throughout this treacherous journey, Tadakatsu, along with other senior Tokugawa retainers, fought valiantly to defend their lord. Time and time again they repelled ambushes, cut down would-be assassins, and when necessary, even offered bribes in gold and silver to buy safe passage. Tadakatsu, as always, distinguished himself through courage and ferocity, personally slaying many of the bandits who dared threaten the safety of their party. His sword never rested, and his vigilance never faltered, until they finally reached the safety of Mikawa. The Ieyatada Nikki, the personal diary of Matsudaira Ieyatada, who was Ieyasu's brother, records the grim toll of their escape. Of the many who began the perilous journey, only 34 survived to reach Ieyattada's residence. Over 200 had perished along the way. Yet once more, against staggering odds, Honda Tadakatsu survived unscathed, a constant figure of strength amidst fear and chaos. Following the death of Oda Nobunaga, a fierce struggle for power erupted among his sons and former generals, each vying to inherit the mantle of Japan's most powerful warlord. Out of the turmoil, one figure rose to prominence: Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Once a humble foot soldier of peasant birth, Hideyoshi's remarkable ascent through talent, strategy, and charm earned him the loyalty of many of Nobunaga's former retainers and solidified his position as the de facto ruler of Japan. Tokugawa Ieyasu, however, viewed Hideyoshi's rapid rise with suspicion.
aligning himself with Oda Nobukatsu, Nobunaga's son. Ieyasu may have seen Hideyoshi's actions as an overreach, an attempt to usurp the power and legacy of their fallen lord. This tension culminated into open conflict, remembered in history as the Komaki Campaign. During this campaign, Tadakatsu played both the diplomat and the warrior. He initiated negotiations with the Akai clan of Tamba province, led by Ishida Tokinao, the younger brother of the late Akai Naomasa. Tokinao, seeking to restore the prestige of his clan, pledged his support to the Tokugawa cause and raised an army in Tamba on Ieyasu's behalf. While Ieyasu departed to engage the Toyotomi forces at Nagakute, Tadakatsu remained stationed at Komaki. There, he observed a large Toyotomi host advancing, led by Hideyoshi himself. With only a handful of men, Tadakatsu boldly rode out to confront the army. His daring challenge, standing defiant before an entire army, left a lasting impression. According to some accounts, Hideyoshi, recognizing Tadakatsu's valor, ordered his troops not to attack the small Tokugawa detachment, a gesture of respect for a fellow warrior of great renown. Following the engagements at Komaki and Nagakute, the fighting would reach a stalemate. Although Ieyasu had secured tactical advantages in both battles, neither side gained decisive control. Ultimately, in the early part of the year 1585, Tokugawa Ieyasu and Toyotomi Hideyoshi agreed to terms and made peace, setting aside their rivalry in the name of political stability. Honda Tadakatsu was named one of the Four Heavenly Kings of Tokugawa, a mark of the highest distinction bestowed upon the foremost loyal, capable and trusted generals who served Tokugawa Ieyasu during his rise to power. Tadakatsu in particular stood out among them for his unmatched bravery, battlefield prowess, and unwavering devotion. From his youth, he fought in nearly every major campaign alongside Ieyasu, and not once was he seriously wounded. His feats became the stuff of legend, charging alone into enemy ranks, standing his ground against overwhelming odds, and emerging each time without a scratch. His iconic helmet adorned with great antlers, and his famed spear, the dragonfly cutter, further set him apart as a warrior of near mythic status. The title of Heavenly King was both symbolic and practical. It drew from Buddhist cosmology, where the Four Heavenly Kings are divine guardians who protect the realm from chaos. In Tokugawa Ieyasu's court, the title signified that these four men were the spiritual and strategic protectors of his domain. They served not only with strength in arms, but with wisdom, discipline, and a deep sense of duty. Tadakatsu earned his place among them through years of unshakable service, peerless skill in war, and a reputation that even his enemies respected. It was said that he was the warrior who surpassed death. The powerful warlord Oda Nobunaga even praised Tadakatsu, calling him a samurai among samurai. The final years of Toyotomi Hideyoshi's reign were marked by unrest and uncertainty. Upon Hideyoshi's death, his only heir Toyotomi Hideyori was merely 5 years old, leaving a dangerous power vacuum at the heart of Japan's fragile political structure. Tensions soared in the capital, where whispers of assassination plots against Tokugawa Ieyasu filled the air. In response, Ieyasu began mobilizing his forces, while his principal opposition, Ishida Mitsunari, conspired with figures such as Otani Yoshisugu, Mashita Nagomori, and Onkokuji Ekei to form an anti-Tokugawa coalition. They appointed Mori Teramoto as the nominal leader of their Western Army, while the Tokugawa forces became remembered to history as the Eastern Army. In the year 1600, as war loomed, Honda Tadakatsu played a crucial role in the Tokugawa campaign against Ishida's faction. On September the 29th, Tadakatsu led an army toward Gifu Castle with soldiers numbering 35,000 strong. In the ensuing Battle of Gifu Castle, Ishida's ally Oda Hidenobu found himself isolated. Facing inevitable defeat, Hidenobu prepared to commit seppuku, but was persuaded to surrender. Thus, Gifu Castle fell to the Eastern Army. The following month, Tadakatsu participated in the Battle of Kuisegawa. During the clash, two Tokugawa generals were caught in a flanking ambush while pursuing Western Army officers Shima Sakon and Akashi Teruzumi. Tadakatsu arrived just in time to break the enemy advance, allowing his comrades to escape and halting the momentum of the Western forces. Later that year came the decisive Battle of Sekigahara, the largest and most consequential battle in Japan's feudal history. As a commander in the Eastern Army, Tadakatsu once again demonstrated his ferocity. At one point in the battle, he charged deep into enemy lines, reaching the camps of powerful Western commanders. In the midst of the melee, his famed horse was either shot or struck by an arrow, leaving Tadakatsu stranded and surrounded by enemy soldiers. In a moment of great peril, his loyal retainer Kaji Katsutada rode out to his aid, offering his own horse and rescuing Tadakatsu from the encirclement. According to some sources, after key Western generals such as Otani Yoshisugu and Shima Sakon fell in battle, Tadakatsu's unit surged forward through the crumbling enemy lines. The Western army overwhelmed, broke formation, and fled. With this overwhelming victory at Sekigahara, Tokugawa Ieyasu emerged as the unchallenged master of Japan. In time, he would be appointed shogun, restoring the authority of the shogunate and bringing an end to the Sengoku period, closing the chapter on centuries of civil war and ushering in the long peace of the Tokugawa era. In the year 1609, Honda Tadakatsu chose to retire from a life spent in unwavering service and glory. The mantle of leadership of the Honda clan would pass to his son, Honda Tadamasa. Though Tadakatsu stepped away from the battlefield, a final legend would come to surround his departure from the world, a fitting end for a man whose very life had become the stuff of myth. Known through the land as the warrior who surpassed death, Tadakatsu had fought in countless battles without ever suffering a serious wound. Yet, according to legend, in the year 1610, while enjoying one of his favourite pastimes, wood carving, he accidentally cut his own hand. It was the first time in his life that he bled from a blade. Upon seeing his own blood, something in him stirred. Some say that he took it as a sign that his invincible spirit had fulfilled its purpose. He quietly resolved that his time had come, and passed away months later at the age of 63, not by sword or sickness, but by the will of his own heart. His legacy endured, not only in story but in lineage. His grandson, Honda Tadatoki, would marry Senhime, the beloved granddaughter of Tokugawa Ieyasu, symbolically intertwining the blood of two of Japan's most powerful and storied families. Tadakatsu's famed spear, the dragonfly cutter, became enshrined as one of the three great spears of Japan. Alongside this weapon, he also wielded a katana crafted by the legendary swordsmith Masamune. The blade, named Nakasukasa, is now revered as a national treasure of Japan. Honda Tadakatsu today is remembered as one of Japan's greatest samurai, a warrior of peerless honor, strength, and immortal renown. Miyamoto Musashi was a legendary Japanese swordsman, strategist, artist,
and writer, whose name has become immortal through tales of his unparalleled skill and his unbroken record of 62 duels, with most of them being to the death. His life is an incredible arc, from youthful savagery to the profound wisdom of age. Celebrated as a kensei or sword saint, Musashi was honoured with a title reserved for warriors whose mastery surpasses even the greatest swordmasters, a status many aspire to, but few ever attain. He was the founder of the Niten Ichi-ryū, a distinctive style of swordsmanship known for its use of two swords. This technique, revolutionary in its time, came to define his approach to combat. However, Musashi's influence extends beyond the battlefield. He is the author of the Book of Five Rings, a timeless work of martial strategy, philosophy, and spiritual insight. It is believed that Musashi fought in the pivotal Battle of Sekigahara, the largest and most consequential clash in Japan's feudal history. He also took part in the Siege of Osaka, a series of brutal conflicts between the Tokugawa shogunate and the Toyotomi clan. This campaign culminated in the Toyotomi's fall and marked the end of the Sengoku period, a time of endless war. To this day, Musashi is widely regarded as the greatest swordsman who ever lived. His legacy endures not only in tales of his combat prowess, but in the wisdom of his writings, which continue to inspire warriors, philosophers, and seekers of truth across the world. This is his story. Musashi was born in the year 1584 in the Harima province, during a time of great upheaval. It was the closing chapter of the samurai's golden age, when the last decisive battles of feudal warfare were being fought. He came into the world as a member of a samurai family, steeped in the traditions of martial discipline and honour. His father, a master swordsman and the head of his own dojo, was both skilled in combat and stern in character. Yet, behind the mask of authority, he harboured resentment towards his son, seeing in the young Musashi a rebellious spirit, arrogant, critical, and disobedient. Their relationship was distant and bitter. By the age of 8, unable to endure his father's cold and overbearing nature, Musashi fled his home and found sanctuary with his uncle Dorin, a Buddhist monk. For 5 formative years, Dorin nurtured the boy's talents, not only in martial arts, but also in calligraphy and painting, seeking to temper the young boy's wildness with spiritual and artistic discipline. But the flame of Musashi's fierce nature burned on, and by the time he turned 13, the path of his life would take a decisive and violent turn. One day, a wandering swordsman named Arima Kihei arrived in the village, a seasoned duelist who had travelled across Japan honing his skills in combat. With fearless audacity, the young Musashi defaced the posted notice and boldly wrote his own name in place of the intended opponent. It was an act of defiance and recklessness, one that could not be ignored. When a messenger came to Dorin's temple to announce that Arima had accepted the challenge, the monk was stunned. He pleaded on Musashi's behalf, pointing to the boy's youth and inexperience, but Arima was unyielding. The only redemption he would accept was a personal apology, offered at the appointed time and place. The day of the duel arrived. As Dorin began to deliver the apology, Musashi burst forward, wielding a 6-foot wooden staff. With a shout, he challenged Arima directly. The swordsman responded with a swift slash of his blade, but Musashi dodged, closed the distance, and threw Arima to the ground. As he struggled to rise, Musashi struck him between the eyes and delivered a savage beating, bludgeoning him to death with his quarterstaff. The killing of Arima was brutal, psychotic, devoid of any formal style or skill, but Musashi had won his first duel, and just killed his first man at the tender age of 13. In the year 1599, at the age of 15 or 16, Musashi left his village and never looked back. He entrusted his family's possessions, furniture, weapons, and other heirlooms to his sister and her husband. From that moment on, he would live by a single unyielding creed. The purpose of any duel is to win by any means necessary. This uncompromising philosophy shaped his path, allowing him to forge a unique and deadly style of swordsmanship. Embracing the life of a wandering warrior seeking to refine his martial spirit, Musashi roamed the land in search of challenge and combat. When he was just 16, he recorded a remarkable feat in his own writings. "When I was 16, I struck down an able strategist, Tadashima Akiyama, an encounter that almost certainly ended with Akiyama's death. In the year 1600, Musashi found himself swept up in one of the most pivotal events in Japanese history, the Battle of Sekigahara. For over a century and a half, Japan had been fractured by civil war, with rival warlords vying for the title of shogun, the supreme military ruler of Japan. 2 years earlier, in the year 1598, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the most powerful man in Japan, had died, leaving his 5-year-old son as his heir. In the chaotic struggle for power that followed, over 160,000 warriors converged on the plains near the village of Sekigahara. The forces aligned into 2 great camps: the Western Army, composed of loyalist warlords fighting in the name of the child heir of Hideyoshi, and the Eastern Army, led by Tokugawa Ieyasu, and one of, if not, the most powerful warlord in Japan. Among the sea of warriors were thousands of wandering swordsmen, hoping to earn honor and employment on the battlefield. Musashi was one of them. He joined the army of Ukita Hidei, a prominent daimyo and general of the Western coalition. Musashi is said to have fought alongside Ukita's men in what became one of the most ferocious clashes of the battle. Musashi would fight against the troops of Fukushima Masanori. Initially, the Ukita forces pushed their enemies back, gaining the upper hand, but disaster soon struck. Unbeknownst to the Ukita forces, several allied generals had secretly defected to the Tokugawa side. As the traitors turned on their former comrades, the tide of the battle shifted violently. The Eastern Army seized control of the field, and the Western forces were crushed. How Musashi survived the bloodbath remains a mystery. What is known is that he fought with courage and distinction, though his hopes of gaining a samurai title were dashed. The surviving warriors, wounded and still clad in armor, were hunted and slain. Musashi, narrowly escaping with his life, became a fugitive. Though he had gambled and lost everything, the battle left an indelible mark on his spirit. He would reflect on its lessons for the rest of his life. For the next 4 years, Musashi wandered the land with no wealth, no armor, and no reputation to his name. He lived in near total poverty, rising with the sun, and devoting countless hours each day to the relentless pursuit of mastery in swordsmanship. The wild, impulsive youth who had once sought glory through bloodshed had begun to change. His encounters with death and the chaos of battle had tempered his spirit. In solitude and hardship, a deeper discipline took root. During this transformative period, Musashi perfected his distinctive 2-sword technique, a revolutionary form of combat that would become both his personal legacy and a formal martial art. Unlike traditional styles, which relied on wielding a single sword with both hands, Musashi's method emphasized balance, fluidity, and adaptability by using a sword in each hand. He believed that gripping a weapon with both hands limited one's range of motion and slowed the warrior's response. His innovation allowed for a more dynamic and responsive form of fighting, one suited to the unpredictability of real battle. After years of seclusion and self-discipline, often training alone in the mountains, Musashi emerged from the wilderness, no longer a reckless wanderer, but a warrior of formidable skill. The young warrior would soon make his way to Kyoto. In the year 1604, Musashi would arrive in the city, which was then the imperial capital of Japan. For the past 4 years, Musashi had lived in seclusion, devoting himself entirely to the perfection of his two-sword technique. Now, at the age of 21, he stepped out of obscurity with a singular aim: to earn renown as one of Japan's greatest warriors. He understood that if he could defeat the masters of one of Kyoto's most prestigious sword schools, his name would spread across the land like wildfire. The Yoshioka brothers, Seijuro and then Chishiro, were the leaders of the renowned Yoshioka school of martial arts. Their reputation was formidable. To grasp the prestige of their school, one must understand that the Yoshioka had once served as official sword instructors to the Ashikaga shoguns, the most powerful rulers in Japan. Among their notable pupils was Ashikaga Yoshiteru himself, a shogun celebrated for his legendary skill with the sword. During his lifetime, he was counted among the finest swordsmen in the nation. Of the two brothers, Seijuro was the elder, known for his intense focus and calm demeanor, traits that gave him a distinct advantage in combat. His younger brother, then Chichiro, by contrast, was brash and quick-tempered. When Musashi challenged them, they scoffed at the idea. To them, he was a nameless wanderer, little more than a peasant. Yet, they could not ignore his lineage. Musashi's father, Shinmen Munisei, had once been regarded as a master swordsman in his own right, and this reputation demanded that the Yoshioka accept the challenge. Legend tells that during the lifetime of the shogun Yoshiteru, a formal match was arranged between the Yoshioka school and Musashi's father. Munisei had won by a margin of 2-1, a result that stung the pride of the Yoshioka. That memory still lingered, a slight passed down through generations. Now, with Musashi standing before them, they saw an opportunity not only to prove their own superiority, but to avenge the honor of their predecessors. Enraged and eager to restore their family's name, they agreed to face the young warrior. According to legend, on the day of the appointed duel, Yoshioka Seijuro, the elder of the two brothers, stood poised and composed, awaiting his challenger. Yet, Musashi was nowhere to be found. Hours slipped by. This delay was no accident, but a deliberate ploy. Musashi's way of unsettling his opponent before even drawing a sword. With each passing moment, Seijuro's famed focus began to fray. At last, Musashi appeared, calm and unreadable. By then, Seijuro's legendary composure had cracked. The two men faced one another, each armed with a bokuto, a wooden training sword. As per the terms, a single strike would decide the victor. With clinical precision, Musashi stepped forward and delivered a crushing blow to Seijuro's left shoulder, shattering his arm and ending the duel. Shamed and broken, Seijiro relinquished his title as the head of the Yoshioka and withdrew from the world of warriors, embracing the quiet path of a Zen monk. But the Yoshioka name had not yet exhausted its fury. The younger brother Denjichiro, hot-blooded and vengeful, challenged Musashi the very next day, this time to a duel to the death. Once again, Musashi arrived late, just long enough to stoke Denjichiro's rage into recklessness. As the duel began, Musashi wasted no time. With a single swift strike to the head, he felled his opponent instantly, and according to some accounts, hit him so hard he died on the spot. With both brothers defeated, the Yoshioka school, once a venerable institution of swordsmanship, lay in ruins, its legacy shattered by the hand of an obscure ronin from a rural village. Leadership of the clan now fell to a boy of just 12, named Matashichiro. Desperate to restore his family's honor, the young heir issued a formal challenge to the man who had dishonored them. The duel was set for nightfall, a detail that aroused Musashi's suspicion. Sensing treachery, he arrived at the site early and concealed himself in the surrounding darkness of a temple. His caution was well founded. When the young boy arrived, he was not alone. Lurking in the shadows were armed men, swordsmen, archers, and riflemen, ready to spring an ambush. The boy was merely the bait. Before they could act, Musashi struck. Emerging from the darkness, he charged the boy and beheaded him in a single merciless blow. Surrounded by enemies, he drew his second sword and fought his way through the ambush, cutting down those who sought his life before vanishing into the rice fields beyond. Thus, the Yoshioka school was finished. Between the years of 1605 and 1612, Musashi journeyed across Japan on what was known as a warrior's pilgrimage, a personal quest of martial refinement. Along the way, he engaged in numerous duels, sharpening his skill with each encounter. In the year 1607, at the age of 24, Musashi sought out a formidable opponent, now known only by his family name, Shishido. This man was a respected swordsman, famed for the command of the kurashigama, a weapon consisting of a sickle attached to a chain with a weighted end. Shishido, hearing of Musashi's rising legend, was determined to put an end to the notion of his invincibility. When they met, Shishido immediately began swinging the chain of his weapon. The iron weight was hissing through the air in deadly arcs. Musashi watched the motion carefully, even admiring the elegance of the technique. To measure the distance and reach of the swinging weapon, Musashi shifted his long sword to his left hand and drew his short sword with his right, adopting the unorthodox reverse two-sword guard. Then, without hesitation, he advanced, spinning the short sword above his head in a strange, almost hypnotic motion. Shishido was taken aback. The sight of the spinning blade unsettled him, breaking his concentration. As Musashi closed the distance, Shishido instinctively began to retreat. In that critical moment, just as his opponent started to backpedal, Musashi hurled the short sword with astonishing speed and accuracy. The blade struck Shishido square in the chest. Without pause, Musashi surged forward and finished the duel, cutting down his stunned adversary in a single fluid motion. After vanquishing Shishido, Musashi journeyed to the new capital of Edo, drawn by the allure of challenging those with formidable reputations. He fought numerous duels, yet worthy opponents were becoming increasingly scarce. In the year 1612, at the age of 29, he arrived in the Chugoku region. For the 2 years prior, he had lingered in Edo, seeking to arrange matches, but his outlaw status cast a long shadow, barring him from facing the finest swordsman of the era. Frustrated but undeterred, he took once more to the road, eager for combat. Yet, even this path was hindered, as the rigid machinery of bureaucracy dictated that every duel be officially sanctioned, a process mired in delay. Muso Gonusuke was a renowned samurai and the traditional founder of the Korui school of Jojutsu, the martial art of the short staff. Like Musashi, he was a wandering swordsman driven by the pursuit of worthy opponents and the refinement of his technique. Alongside his dueling, he taught swordsmanship to a select few, and his reputation grew as a formidable warrior who, according to legend, had defeated many of Japan's finest without ever tasting defeat himself. It was even said that he had previously encountered and defeated Musashi's father. When Musashi stood before him, Gonusuke is said to have asked with a hint of disdain whether the son's technique matched that of the father. Musashi replied evenly, "If you have seen my father's technique, then you have seen mine." The duel commenced. Gonusuke, brimming with confidence, lunged forward, sword in hand, but Musashi, calm and composed, effortlessly evaded the strike. In a flash, he crossed his long and short swords in an X-shaped parry, trapping Gonusuke's blade and halting the assault with impeccable control. Stunned by the ease in which he had been outmaneuvered, Gonusuke withdrew in silence. The defeat cut deeper than any blade. Seeking understanding, he retired to a monastery, where he dedicated himself to meditation and introspection. Musashi's most celebrated duel was against the famed samurai Sasaki Kojiro, a warrior so skilled with the sword, he earned the fearsome title the Demon of the Western Provinces. According to legend, in the spring of the year 1612, the 29-year-old Musashi made his way to Kokura in northern Kyushu. There he was welcomed by Nagaoka Sado, a samurai retainer of the Hosokawa clan and a former student of Musashi's father. By fate or coincidence, another great swordsman happened to be in Kokura at the same time, Sasaki Kojiro. While Musashi was still building his reputation as a duelist, Kojiro was already a well-established master, widely regarded as one of the finest, if not the finest swordsman in all Japan. His reputation preceded him. Not only was he unmatched in combat, he was also known as a man of refinement, cultured, elegant, and skilled in the art of courtly manners. At the time, Kojiro was staying at the local castle as an honoured guest of the Hosokawa family. Rumour had it that he was soon to join the personal retinue of Hosokawa Tadaoki. Kojiro was especially revered for a technique of his own invention, the swallow reversal. History describes it as a deceptive maneuver in which, after delivering a powerful downward strike, the swordsman would suddenly twist his wrist to launch an equally deadly upward slash, catching his opponent off guard. According to legend, Kojiro had perfected this move by cutting swallows out of the air mid-flight with his katana. Others claimed the technique imitated the fluid, unpredictable motion of a swallow just before taking flight. Musashi, however, was a completely different type of warrior, mysterious and unconventional. He had emerged seemingly from nowhere, claiming no master, no school, no lineage. Though his skill was undeniable, many still viewed him as a dangerous wanderer, an unpredictable loner who defied tradition. Yet, the opportunity before him was irresistible. To face a swordsman of Kojiro's stature was a challenge Musashi could not ignore. He sent the customary letter of challenge, which Kojiro accepted without hesitation. The situation was delicate. Musashi, a guest of a Hosokawa retainer, was challenging another guest of Lord Hosokawa himself. However, no objections were raised and the challenge was accepted by Kojiro. The duel was set for 8 AM on April the 14th, yet, on the eve of the battle, Musashi vanished. A search swept through Kokura, but Musashi had disappeared as silently as a shadow at dusk. The morning of the duel dawned clear and tense. Sasaki Kojiro arrived at the beach precisely at the appointed hour, dressed immaculately in his finest robes, his posture serene, his mind sharpened for the contest ahead. But there was no sign of his opponent. Minutes stretched into hours. Kojiro and his assembled witnesses stood waiting, their anticipation turning slowly into unease. Then, far off on the water, a small rowboat came into view, its figurehead unmistakable. It was Musashi himself. Earlier that morning, samurai of the Hosokawa clan had found him fast asleep in a modest inn. When they woke him, he took time with his breakfast and dressed without urgency. He gave no sign that he was about to enter into a duel that could cost him his life. Musashi arrived at the island well past the scheduled time, but utterly composed. There was not the slightest hint of anxiety in his demeanour. He wore no ceremonial garb, only the rough worn clothes of his everyday life. His kimono sleeves were tied behind his back, with a ribbon for ease of movement, and a coarse towel that wrapped around his forehead. In his hands was no polished blade, but a wooden sword carved that morning from a boat's oar, crude in form, but wielded with purpose. Before him stood Kojiro, a vision of elegance, clad in rich fabrics and holding a masterfully crafted weapon. The contrast was stark, the polished and the raw, the formal and the feral, a man of tradition and the rogue of instinct. They were day and night, each a mirror of what the other was not. As soon as Kojiro saw him get out of the boat, he scolded him from the shore. "Are you so afraid that you've forgotten even the time of our duel?" he snapped. Musashi didn't say a word, and simply stood guard with his wooden sword, slowly approaching his opponent. Kojiro prepared to meet him, drew his katana, and threw the scabbard to the ground. This act was a sign that the fight would be to the death. As the waves carried Kojiro's scabbard out to sea, Musashi gave a mocking smile. "You've already lost, Kojiro," he said calmly. "The outcome of this duel is decided." Kojiro, puzzled, narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" Musashi replied, his tone as casual as if commentating on the weather. "Since when does a warrior who expects to survive discard the scabbard of his sword?" Musashi was a master of not only the blade, but of the mind. His words, like his tardiness, were weapons in themselves, subtle acts of psychological warfare meant to unnerve his opponent. The discarded scabbard, the hours-long delay, the unorthodox dress, all calculated moves in a game Kojiro was only beginning to understand. Though Kojiro kept his composure, Musashi's arrogance cut deeper than any sword might. Determined to silence it, Kojiro raised his blade high, assuming the high guard and preparing to strike. He would bring his fearsome sword down upon Musashi's brow and end the duel in a single stroke. But Musashi was already in motion. As Kojiro's great blade sliced through the air like a bolt of lightning, Musashi's strike fell at the very same instant, his wooden sword arcing downward, aimed squarely at Kojiro's head. In that single breath of time, fate was sealed. Both blows landed almost simultaneously. Then, stillness. The two warriors froze, locked in the final stances of their attacks, motionless as statues. A hushed silence fell over the beach. Time itself seemed to pause. No one dared breathe. Then, gently, the towel tied around Musashi's forehead fluttered loose. It had been split cleanly in two. The pieces caught the wind and drifted away like fallen petals. And in the next moment, Kojiro collapsed silent, lifeless, without a sound. At last, Musashi moved. He stepped forward, closed the distance in 2 strides, and delivered a final swift blow to ensure his opponent's end. He stood over Kojiro's still body, unmoved, watching until the last tremor of life had passed. Then, without a word, he turned to the assembled witnesses. He bowed with a calm formality, then walked with quiet resolve to the waiting boat. He stepped aboard without hesitation and set off toward the mainland. He stood in silence, eyes on the open sea ahead, as the waves carried him away from the shore into legend, or so the story goes. Between the years of 1614 and 1615, Musashi took part in the siege of Osaka, a pivotal conflict between the Tokugawa shogunate and the Toyotomi clan. At the heart of the conflict was Toyotomi Hideyori, son of the late Toyotomi Hideyoshi, once the most powerful man in Japan. For years, Hideyori lived in seclusion, while rumors spread by his Tokugawa-appointed guardian Katagiri Katsumoto painted him as weak and ineffectual in an attempt to prevent aggression from the shogunate. In the year 1611, however, Hideyori met with Tokugawa Ieyasu, who was surprised to find the young man far more capable than expected. By the year 1614, Hideyori had begun to rebuild Osaka Castle and gather a force of ronin and opponents of the Tokugawa regime, an act seen as defiance. Although Katsumoto tried to mediate, proposing Yodo Dono be sent to Edo as a hostage to ease tensions, she refused. Suspecting betrayal, Yodo Dono expelled Katsumoto and others loyal to the Tokugawa. With diplomacy broken and armed resistance mounting in Osaka, Ieyasu seized the moment. The Tokugawa launched a campaign to crush the Toyotomi once and for all, thus beginning the siege of Osaka. It was believed that Musashi participated in the Tokugawa army under the command of Mizuno Katsutoshi, a powerful daimyo. Musashi reportedly acted as Katsutoshi's bodyguard, now having a reputation as an amazing swordsman. Although little is recorded of Musashi's direct role in the conflict, it is known that he served under Katsutoshi, who fought and triumphed at the Battle of Domyoji during the siege of Osaka. The final and decisive clash came at the Battle of Tennoji in June of the year 1615, where the Tokugawa forces surrounded Osaka Castle. In a last attempt to turn the tide, Hideyori devised a bold plan. His commanders Sanada Yukimura and Ono Furunaga would engage the Tokugawa in the front, while Akashi Morishige launched a surprise attack from the rear. In the midst of this maneuver, Hideyori himself would charge from the castle, rallying his troops under the banner of his father Toyotomi Hideyoshi. However, Tokugawa forces led by Ieyasu himself held firm. Though Ieyasu was wounded in battle, Sanada was killed and beheaded, and Morishige's flanking attack collapsed. With the strategy in ruins, Hideyori remained as the last line of defense. A relentless bombardment then destroyed much of Osaka Castle, which then caught fire, and soon after, Hideyori and his mother Yododono committed seppuku. Hideyori's young son and the last heir of the Toyotomi line was executed, along with countless ronin. The siege of Osaka marked the final great confrontation between two samurai armies, and Musashi was there to witness the end of an era. He would have been around 30 years old during this climactic battle. Miyake Gunbei was a distinguished retainer in the service of Honda Tadamasa. Several years after Tadamasa had established his rule over the region, Musashi opened a dojo in the town and boldly displayed a sign reading, "Miyamoto Musashi, the foremost swordsman in all Japan." With this proclamation, Tadamasa felt it was a slight to his authority and his clan's reputation. He commanded his most skilled vassal, Gunbei, to visit Musashi and put his claim to the test. In the year 1621, Gunbei called on Musashi, but he was made to wait for over an hour. Fuming, he exclaimed, "What insolence, to keep me, one of the principal vassals of the fief, waiting, while he is but a masterless ronin." At last Musashi appeared, and without apology said, "Had I known your visit was to challenge me in combat, I would have come sooner. But I was in the middle of a game of Go with a guest. If you'd like, we can go into the garden now. I'll let you choose the weapon, steel or wood, whichever you prefer." Gunbei, further irritated by Musashi's calm and unbothered manner, restrained himself, remembering that his lord had instructed him to only test Musashi's skill and not to harm him. As they stepped into the garden, Gunbei snapped off a piece of bamboo to use as his weapon. Musashi took up his usual wooden sword. The duel was over in a heartbeat. Gunbei, stunned by Musashi's speed and technique, acknowledged without hesitation that Musashi had truly earned his title. He returned to Tadamasa and gave his report that Musashi was indeed the greatest swordsman in the land. In the year 1633, Musashi took up residence with Hosokawa Tadatoshi, the daimyo of Kumamoto Castle, who had recently relocated to the Kumamoto domain from Kokura. During this period, Musashi devoted much of his time to teaching, painting, and introspection, engaging in few duels. Yet, one notable encounter took place in the year 1634, when he crossed paths with Matabe, a celebrated master of the lance. While Musashi was staying in Kokura, Matabe visited him repeatedly, eager to learn from the famed swordsman. At one point, the lord of Ogasawara requested a formal match between the two warriors. Though Matabe was reluctant, he could not refuse his lord's command. For the duel, Matabe chose a bamboo lance, while Musashi selected a wooden practice sword. As the match began, Matabe struck first, launching swift and disciplined attacks. But Musashi, calm and composed, closed the distance and broke through his opponent's guard, using a middle stance, claiming victory in the first two bouts. In the third round, however, Matabe's lance slipped between Musashi's legs. At this, Musashi stepped back and said with a wry smile, "I was touched, so this time I've lost." He then turned to the gathered spectators and praised Matabe's exceptional skill with the lance. Later, Matabe reflected on the encounter. "Master Musashi is a true adept. I never managed to land a blow. He allowed me that final round, only to spare my pride." By this time, Musashi was nearing 50, past his physical prime. But according to this tale, he seemed unmatched in depth, humility, and grace. In the year 1637, Musashi took part in suppressing the Shimabara Rebellion, a major uprising in the Shimabara domain against the Tokugawa shogunate. The revolt, lasting from December the 17th in the year 1637 to April the 15th in the year 1638, was sparked by oppressive tax hikes imposed to fund the construction of Shimabara Castle and the brutal persecution of Christianity. The rebellion was led by the charismatic 16-year-old Amakusa Shiro, a coalition of dissatisfied ronin and Catholic peasants. In response, the shogunate dispatched a force of over 125,000 troops, supported by the Dutch East India Company. The rebels initially besieged Tomioka and Hondo castles, but were driven back by reinforcements from the neighbouring domains. They then attempted to take Shimabara Castle, but again failed. The rebels would regroup at the ruins of Hara Castle, once home to the Arima clan. There, they fortified their position using timber from their boats and supplies they had seized from several clans, readying themselves for a final stand. Under the reign of the shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu, the combined forces of the local domains, led by Itakura Shigemasa, laid siege to Hara Castle, the final stronghold of the Shimabara rebels. Among those present was the legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, who served as a military advisor to aid Hosokawa Tadatoshi. Though he played a largely strategic role, one of the few verifiable accounts of Musashi's participation in active combat recounts a moment where he was struck from his horse by a stone hurled by a peasant rebel, a rare glimpse of the now aging warrior caught amidst the chaos of war. The shogunate forces, struggling to break the stalemate at Hara Castle, called upon the Dutch for assistance. In response, the Dutch supplied gunpowder and cannons, and an all-out bombardment of the rebel fortress began. Despite the relentless assault, the defenders, many of them seasoned former samurai, held their ground for months, inflicting significant losses on the shogunate troops. Harsh winter conditions made the conflict even more grueling for both sides. Yet the rebels, isolated and cut off from supplies, soon faced dwindling stores of food and ammunition. On April the 4th of the year 1638, in a final act of desperation, over 27,000 rebels launched a massive assault against the 125,000 strong shogunate army. The attack failed, and the rebels were forced to retreat. 8 days later, the shogunate troops breached the outer defences of the fortress. The remaining rebels continued to resist fiercely, inflicting heavy casualties until they were finally overwhelmed on April the 15th. In the aftermath, the shogunate executed an estimated 37,000 rebels and sympathizers in a brutal purge. The severed head of Amakusa Shiro, the youthful and charismatic rebel leader, was taken to Nagasaki and put on public display as a warning to others. The Shimabara Rebellion was the largest civil conflict of the Edo period, and one of the few major uprisings during the otherwise stable and orderly rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. By this point, Miyamoto Musashi had taken part in some of the most decisive events in Japan's feudal history: the Battle of Sekigahara, which unified the nation, the Siege of Osaka, which brought the Toyotomi clan to ruin, and now the Shimabara Rebellion, a final echo of resistance. He was a man who had witnessed death in every form, on the battlefield, in single combat, and across the shifting tides of an era. Up to this point, Musashi's life had been defined by restless journeys, duels, and a pursuit of mastery. But as the years passed, he began to seek something different: stability, a place where he could lay down his sword, reflect on a lifetime of experience, and commit his philosophy to words. In the year 1643, at around the age of 58, he found that refuge in a quiet Buddhist retreat, nestled halfway up a mountainside. There, in the solitude of a stone cave, Musashi entered the final chapter of his life. Surrounded by nature and silence, he began to write the work that would forever enshrine his name in history, the Book of Five Rings. The 5 books refer to the idea that there are different elements of battle, just as there are different physical elements of life. There was a book of earth, water, fire, wind, and the void. The Book of Earth serves as an introduction and metaphorically discusses martial arts, leadership, and training as building a house. The Book of Water concerns strategy, spirituality, and philosophy. The Book of Fire refers to the heat of battle. The Book of Wind discusses what Musashi considers to be the failings of various contemporary schools of sword fighting, and that although most schools have secret and ancient strategies, most form as a derivative of other martial arts. The Book of the Void, although short, lists philosophically the nature of both human knowledge and things which cannot be seen. Musashi emphasizes that people must learn to perceive that which they cannot understand or comprehend. In the Book of Five Rings, Musashi outlines and champions his renowned two-sword style. The Way of Walking Alone is a brief but profound work written by Musashi just 1 week before his death. Comprising 21 precepts, it was composed as he renounced his worldly possessions in quiet preparation for the end of his life. Spare and uncompromising, the text reflects Musashi's introspective philosophy, a life shaped by discipline, solitude, and unwavering honesty. It offers a final glimpse into the mind of a warrior who had walked his path alone, guided by clarity, purpose, and an unshakable inner resolve. These are his 21 principles. Accept everything just the way it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Do not, under any circumstances, depend on a partial feeling. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. Be detached from desire your whole life long. Do not regret what you have done. Never be jealous. Never let yourself be saddened by a separation. Resentment and complaint are appropriate neither for oneself nor others. Do not let yourself be guided by the feeling of lust or love. In all things, have no preferences. Be indifferent to where you live. Do not pursue the taste of good food. Do not hold onto possessions you no longer need. Do not act following customary beliefs. Do not collect weapons or practice with weapons beyond what is useful. Do not fear death. Do not seek to possess either goods or fiefs in your old age. Respect Buddha and the gods without counting on their help. You may abandon your own body, but you must preserve your honor. Never stray from the way. While composing his books, Musashi was acutely aware that his time was drawing to a close, likely due to an illness believed to be cancer. The paradox of his life lies in how, by confronting death repeatedly on the battlefield and honing his swordsmanship to perfection, he transcended earthly fears to attain a profound peace, an enlightenment born through the art of the sword. This spiritual awakening sets Musashi apart as an extraordinary warrior, unlike any other. Beyond his martial prowess, Musashi was a gifted artist and writer, skilled in painting, sculpture, and poetry. He passed away in the year 1654, and one of his students described his final moments. Musashi had himself raised upright, tightened his belt, and secured his short sword. Sitting with one knee raised, he held his sword in his left hand and his cane in his right. It was in this dignified posture, at the age of 62, that he breathed his last. The principal vassals of Lord Hosokawa and other officers solemnly conducted the funeral rites, erecting a tomb for him on Mount Iwato by the Lord's order. Legend holds that during the funeral, a lightning bolt streaked across the sky, as if nature itself marked the passing of a great soul. Many regard Musashi as the greatest samurai to have ever lived, victorious in over 60 duels, a participant in major battles, an author of philosophical works, and a creator of his own martial art. One of my favourite quotes in the Book of Fire composed by Musashi goes like this: "As one man can defeat 10 men, so can 1,000 men defeat 10,000. However, you can become a master of strategy by training alone with a sword, so that you can understand the enemy's stratagems, his strength and resources, and come to appreciate how to apply strategy to beat 10,000 enemies." I would like to give a huge thank you to all of my members. Your contribution is valuable to the continuation of the channel, and I appreciate you all immensely. A special thank you to John Sides. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe and share, and I'll see you all next week for another History Profile.